Star.
The reason I'm prepared for this position is because I've been preparing for this all my life.
As far as James, he's our guy.
We still got James Harden. Our goal is still to win a championship.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Being in a win-now situation, that's great. I'm a win-now coach.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
An absolute heartbreaker for the Houston Rockets in their season opener, losing 128-126 in overtime. Not the way we wanted that game to end at all, but still, look, there's a lot of good takeaways to have from this game. We'll get there in just a second. What's up, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get 20% off your very next order. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and the founder/managing editor of ClutchCityControlRoom.com, your home for all things Houston hoops. Follow me on Twitter at JT Gatlin, the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, as well as the blog at Clutch City CR. Now, joining us today is none other than also native Houstonian himself, Mr. Roosh Williams, host of the Noble and Roosh show on ballislife.com. Roosh, what a painful way for that game to end after it felt like they were about to escape with a victory, undermanned, understaffed, and then to have it go down like that. It's just heart-wrenching.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there's really no way around that, but I mean, super encouraging. James Harden looked great. Christian Wood looked great. So yeah, it was unfortunate. I mean, I don't think anyone expected to win. You know, like some of us thought we could really pull it out, but to expect to win. And honestly, I'm okay. Sometimes you have to be okay with the way it happened. And the way that this happened was death by McCollum. CJ McCollum was on fire. He was not missing anything. And sometimes you just have to live with that. Those were tough shots, most of them.
Yeah, I mean, just a crazy night for stats all around. I mean, from the Rockets side of things, James Harden, 44 points, now leads, in history, has dropped 8+ 40-point games against the Blazers, has that record all on his own. 17 assists, matched his career high there. 14 of 16 from the free throw line, 12 of 20 shooting overall. Then C. Wood put up a monster night as well. They did match that 75-point number exactly that we were discussing pregame, which is crazy. See with 31 points, 13 boards, 3 assists, 14 of 22 shooting. And then on the Blazer side, Damian Lillard, 32 points. CJ McCollum, 44 points on 17 of 30 shooting. It's just a really crazy night overall. But the guy that I think everybody was so pleased with and surprised with, none other than Jae'Sean Tate. Tate absolutely stole the show. 13 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, 5 of 9 shooting. And he had some insane defensive plays, specifically the one where he ran the distance of the court after trapping in the corner with PJ Tucker, ran the distance of the court, and then jumped in the air and basically just tore the ball away from, I think it was Cantor. It might have been Nurkic. It was one of them. They basically look the same when they're out there. Tore the ball away from him and saved the Rockets from what would have been a surefire, 2-point dunk conversion. Just, I'm blown away by Tate. And I know that he was your sleeper pick to have a really impressive game in this one.
Yeah, he was amazing. And KP picked Sterling Brown, and Sterling Brown had a really good game too. It was really nice to actually see him take a pump fake the 3 and dribble in for the pull-up from mid-range to get a big bucket. That was interesting, something we have not seen with the Rockets. But Jae'Sean Tate, his hustle was incredible. He had that 3-point attempt at the end that rimmed in and out, just barely rimmed in and out. And if he made that shot, he would have had 17 points in his debut. Just incredibly impactful. I mean, honestly, he's like PJ Tucker if you swap the corner 3 reliability for the ability to drive and slash and finish at the basket. And the defensive intensity was amazing. So, I mean, I don't know. Jae'Sean Tate looks like a rotation player off the bat, if you ask me personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to revisit the fact that, look, we cannot overstate, how important it is that the Rockets were missing essentially really four quality rotation guys in John Wall, Eric Gordon, DeMarcus Cousins, and Ben McLemore. Like straight up, they're missing such a huge chunk of their rotation right now to go what was essentially a 7-man deep roster because Caboclo played 4 minutes. That's it. Was unfortunately kind of unimpressive in his 4 minutes that he was out there. And then Broderick Thomas just played 10 minutes. Now, Thomas looked, decent in his 10 minutes, which was kind of surprising, a nice little surprise there. But, for the most part, to go 7 men deep and Sterling Brown only playing 20 minutes, you had Christian Wood who played 44 minutes. You had James Harden went 43 minutes deep in this one out of an available 53 minutes across overtime. It's just a little crazy. And to think about that sequence right there, at the end of the game, I couldn't tell if Harden was upset with himself walking away from that play, which, resulted in a turnover, trying to win the game or at least tie it up. But, I don't know if PJ was necessarily like maybe out of position there because he was kind of like cutting in on the baseline. But
I don't know why PJ wasn't in the corner.
Yeah, and I think that might have been why we saw that frustration from Harden, because I think he elevated expecting Tucker to be in the corner, and Tuck was already cutting in at about that 15-foot mark near the baseline, and so Harden had to adjust his pass midair, and it landed right in the hands of Robert Covington, who Covington was being sucked in by James Harden's drive. So it should have been a wide open three-pointer in the corner for PJ Tucker. I don't know if Tuck thought that Harden was, going to toss up a floater or what, and he was looking for the offensive rebound opportunity. But that wasn't Tucker's only mistake in this game, because he also had the defensive rebound where he crashed on top of Nurkic and gave Nurk 2 free throws, which, hey, he missed them, but that was totally unnecessary for PJ to come back in because there were 2 Rockets boxing out Nurk right there. And overall, I think this is a kind of a rough outing for PJ Tucker, a guy who really wants a 2-year contract extension inked with the Rockets.
Yeah, it was a rough outing for PJ. I mean, I've been saying that the Rockets will be at their best in this version of the NBA when PJ Tucker's coming off the bench for them. They've been over-relying on PJ Tucker for a very long time now. He's great. I love what he brings to the table. One of my favorite Rockets role players ever, period. One of my favorite Texas Longhorns players ever, period. But, I don't want him in the closing lineup. I think the Rockets have options now. I think a guy like Jayshawn Tate can potentially make PJ Tucker expendable in those moments if you even choose to go that route, So, yeah, PJ had some mistakes. And like I said, hopefully he gets to a point where he can come off the bench, because the Rockets have athleticism. They have energy, hustle. They don't have shooting at the moment, at least, without some of their key players like Gordon and McLemore in terms of shooting. And I think the defense will overall be better when you get John Wall, who's great defensively, especially on the perimeter, and Eric Gordon back as well. And also DeMarcus Cousins. He's not, great defensively per se. However, against a team like Portland, when Nurkic is playing, you can run DeMarcus Cousins on defense. He's going to soak up those post-ups that Nurkic has, and he's going to let you man up on Portland.
Yeah, talking about the rebound department, the Rockets were rebounded, not by a lot. It's not small ball Rockets to, literally every other team in the league getting decimated on the boards. But they did lose in the rebounding department, 45-42. They did have 10 offensive rebounds to 11 by the Blazers, so only lost by 1 in that category. But to your point about DeMarcus Cousins, he is, such a nice guy to have when he's available. To throw at some of those bigger centers. They were commenting on it in the broadcast, Bullard and Ackerman, just talking about the fact that Christian Wood just, he doesn't have a lot of sand in his pants, not a lot of meat on his bones. And maybe that's something that changes over time, but it's important to remember that Clint Capella was also, similarly built and then added all that muscle, and it took away a lot of his quickness, a lot of his explosion, that second bounce that he had. And so there's a very fine line that you have to walk if you're Christian Wood on how much you bulk up to be able to deal with some of the bigger centers versus staying lean and being able to be a mismatch for them to where they can't keep up with you offensively. So, being able to throw Cousins at bigger guys like that is crucial. And he's got great hands defensively. He's just a smart defender.
Yeah, Christian Wood is going to be a 4, most likely, right? He's going to be a power forward. The way the NBA is now, you need a big guy like Cousins, maybe a couple of them just in case. For most teams to start them, And then as the game progresses and rotations kind of take their toll, you're going to see Christian Wood at the 5, and you're going to see him match up with teams at the 5. But you're always going to need that switch up piece like a DeMarcus Cousins so that you're not just getting bullied for stretches of the game, right? I see a lot of people commenting on this, and it's been one of the most glaring things in terms of a red flag for the Rockets since the preseason for me. Danuel House was poor tonight. I thought he missed 2 free throws. Defensively, he had that lapse that resulted in CJ McCollum hitting the go-ahead game winner. His shot, let's see how he shot. He shot 3 of 8 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3. I think he made his first one and then missed his next 3. He missed one in crunch time as well. Just overall, don't really like what I've been seeing from House. He has not seemed to take any type of step forward. He just seems like the same player as last year, except he feels like he's not really fitting in with the kind of gang of new rotation players the Rockets have. So I don't know. I think there's a lot up in the air right now for the Rockets. I think that's a good thing, though, because they have a lot of talent. When they get Eric Gordon back, John Wall back, Ben McLemore back, DeMarcus Cousins back, if they get a chance to make a trade and open up room to sign Gerald Green, all of a sudden, man, this team is like 10, 11, 12 deep. Maybe 12 is an exaggeration. But I liked what I saw. And again, I want to point out the Rockets were 11 of 35 from 3. That's got to be one of their lowest as far as the regular season goes. And they had no problem scoring points. No problem at all. They didn't have any. They had 2 of their best shooters not on the floor, not even playing, with Eric Gordon and Ben McLemore. They have DeMarcus Cousins, who's your stretch 5, not out there. And they were less than 33% from 3, but it didn't matter, right? Because they're scoring in different ways. They're getting to the basket. You saw James Harden. There were a couple of times, man, late in the game, like the game was in the bounce. I think it was 123-118. I might be wrong here, but I think it was a 5-point deficit, maybe a minute and a half left. Harden was about to step back, and I was standing up watching the game, and I said, please don't step back. Please don't step back. And he stepped back and like kind of faked it, and then boom, went in, and I think he flipped it in or just had an easy layup. And 123-120, all of a sudden, it was amazing to see that. Like, blew my mind. And I wonder if that was a conscious thing. If Steven Silas was in his ear saying that, I wonder if he did that because he was just hooping freely without thinking of like the system, the Rockets system. I really wonder where that came from in the moment, if it was like intentional or just kind of fluid. And then I also want to point out, and I tweeted about this, man, he hit those 2 step back threes late, daggers. I mean, ice cold shots, the type of stuff that we've been wanting from him for years, that to his credit, he's done a lot in the regular season. And I think I theorized that it's because he was saving his legs. He wasn't, he didn't shoot a bunch of step backs. He was 6 of 13 from 3. So up to that point, he had only shot about 9 or 10. And some of them were deep and flat footed, but none of those, like, he wasn't over relying on the step backs. And you saw on the first one, he had the legs to hit it, the first dagger 3. On the second dagger 3, he had he like recoiled and then shot it and had the strength. Like, it was incredible. I mean, it just looked like a brand new Harden. We got the best of both worlds. We got the debut in 2016 against the Lakers, 17 assists Harden, with the debut with Mike D'Antoni, which I was in attendance at that game. And then we got, God mode Harden, 40 plus, like, just drop buckets whenever you want, right? It's amazing. So I really hope we get to see this through with Harden, Christian Wood, DeMarcus Cousins, John Wall, and Steven Silas. There's so much positive to take away from what we just saw, despite the fact that they lost.
Yeah, again, this game would have been a lot better, would have been a lot more fun to talk about had they won, but still a lot of great takeaways from this. And I'm already seeing some questions in the chat, so we do want to get to y'all's questions, and we'll get there. Well, we're gonna get there in just a moment. Farouche, come on, how you gonna derail my show like that, man? I got to take a break. We're like 10 minutes into this thing.
I'm not derailing. I'm grooving.
Okay, well, you can groove after we hit this little break, all right? So we'll take your questions and keep discussing this game, breaking out what we liked, what we didn't like in just one moment. And here's the part where I edit all this out later. Killing me, dog. All right.
You love it, baby. You love it.
God.
Williams.
All right, here we go. All right. This is the behind the scenes. This is what you guys don't get to see when it's just a podcast. All right. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, breaking down the Rockets, regretfully a loss in the season opener, but all the good stuff that we've seen. So, Roosh, first let's dive into some of these questions because I've seen a few pop up here. So this one I saw kind of early on, thought it was a little interesting. Do y'all think it was a good idea for Silas to keep Harden in during that last defensive stand. I personally think you go first. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, personnel wise, I'm a fan of this type of coaching, right? Where I tweeted about this as well. We saw Silas with 17 seconds left in the first half. He put Harden back in the game because the Rockets got the ball back. And he, it's like they talk about offense, defense substitutions late in the game when at a free throw, you'll sub in your offensive guy because you're about to get the ball back, and vice versa. When the other team's shooting a free throw, you'll sub your defensive guys in because you're about to be on defense. It's kind of that same idea, right? The Rockets got the ball back. They had one possession left in the half. Harden was getting his rest, but it was only 17 seconds. So Steven Silas said, hey, go back in the game. It ended up not resulting in points. I think the Rockets turned it over, but the mindset was there. So in that
active coaching mindset where he's making these little like chess match changes throughout the game.
Absolutely, man. Because look, the Rockets lost by 2 points, right? If they had gotten a 3 on that possession, theoretically they could have won the game. And sometimes games come down to that. So I don't understand why certain coaches don't pay attention to detail in that respect. However, at the end of the game, same idea, right? I'd be putting David Nwaba, Jayshawn Tate, Sterling Brown. I'm putting my defensive horses in the game to get me a stop, secure the ball, and call timeout, and then I'll get Harden back in the game, right?
To that point, though, I don't think it was a mistake to necessarily leave Harden in the game, legitimately, because there's a lot of things that could happen. You get a good defensive rebound and you get an outlet pass to somebody who's on the break for 2, something like that. A dunk or a breakaway to win the game. I don't think it's a mistake to leave Harden in the game in that situation, because I think his issues on defense are overstated to an extent. Yes, he falls asleep, occasionally over the course of a game where he'll lose track of a man off of a backdoor cut or for an open 3 or something like that. Like we saw in this very game where he lost, Damian Lillard on a 3-point attempt earlier in the game. And then he got, hip checked by Nurkic as he was trying to get back out to him and clean up his missed rotation. But for the most part, at the end of games, when we see defensive possessions that come down to the wire, where he's mentally locked in at the tail end of a game, he's perfectly fine. He's you could argue he's maybe even a plus defender at the tail end of games when he's locked in.
House made the mistake tonight. House was the one that gave the game up at the very end on that last play. But I do agree with you, right? Harden is sometimes slow-footed. His strength on defense is the fact that he's strong. It's his strength. It's his ability to absorb contact and not be moved. And it's his ability to use his hands. He's got long arms and he's got quick hands, but he doesn't move his feet, right? But regardless, sometimes we see defense as a team thing, right? House got caught sleeping, ball watching, and he effectively lost the game. It didn't come down to his individual defensive skill. He just was not paying attention to where he needed to be within the scheme when the ball was moving in certain places across the court, But again, look, at the end of the day, man, CJ McCollum, 44 points? I think he was 8 of 14 from 3.
9 of 16. But
9 of 16. That's ridiculous, right? That's probably it's probably one of the best games of his life. And I love his game, but it's probably one of the best games of his life. And we didn't have John Wall in there, and we didn't have Eric Gordon, who those two guys probably would have individually been guarding both Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. I guarantee you, once CJ McCollum started lighting up, I bet John Wall would have said, "Yo, let me go stick him." So
he's got that mentality for sure.
Yeah, seriously. So, again, all things considered, number one, the Rockets have the most, uplifting thing is that the Rockets have no problem scoring points without 3 of their best 5 offensive talents and without shooting the 3 very well.
And because all of that is generated by the gravity that James Harden and Christian Wood create, because we're back to seeing that version of the Houston Rockets where rather than relying on that 5-out spacing with nothing dynamic in their offense where they can't get any movement towards the rim, so many times we saw the, great rolls, beautiful rolls by Christian Wood heading in towards the rim where Harden is able to just so gently loft that pass over the top of the defenders, and Wood gets it and then either is able to subsequently finish right at the rim, sidestep his defender, get to the free throw line, get fouled, or kick it out for an open shot, depending on how the defense collapses. And that was an element of the game that they had when they had Clint Capella. But Clint also, struggled at times making those reads because he didn't have a tight dribble. He didn't have the ability to, maneuver as finesse as Wood does in traffic. We saw Wood, beat three plus defenders sometimes in this game to either finish at the rim or create for somebody else. Just, a really amazing showing from him. He continues to build on, the hype that we had for Christian Wood. As soon as he became a Houston Rocket, we were all psyched about it. And then other fan bases have been chiming in, trying to talk a little bit of smack, saying that the Rockets are getting their hopes up about a guy who showed out in 12 games last season. But he really is the truth. And I feel like this is, going to be consistent production from him moving forward. Now we've got another question here.
Well, can I comment on Christian Wood real quick?
Yeah. Go for it.
So, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that three-pointer late in overtime that Jayshawn Tate rimmed in and out, I think Christian Wood drove to the middle and kicked that out to Tate for the open three, which is something you would never have seen Clint Capella do. Love Clint Capella, just wasn't in his toolbox. And another thing that can't be understated for big men, it's one thing to be big, it's one thing to have the skills to like dribble and whatever. Touch around the basket is so important. It's what made some of the best big men of all time, right? Shaq, Hakeem. Christian Wood has touch around the basket. We saw him dropping in those floaters. Some of them would hit the back of the rim and like bounce up high and then drop, but he has like the soft touch, he's able to catch it off the roll and finish or kind of improvise in the moment and adjust. And that's the kind of thing you can't teach. I would have liked to see him shoot the ball from three more. I think he had a couple pull in, like dribbling mid-rangers. I'm looking right now to see his 3-point percentage. It was
0 of 2.
0 of 2. So I would have liked to see more stretch game from him. But yeah, overall, man, it looks like the Rockets got a player. He's tall, he can dribble, he can create, he can shoot. We think he's got touch around the basket. He can play off the pick and pop and off the pick and roll. I mean, come on.
All right. Well, we've got our next question leading up right now. Does this L hurt us in trying to convince Harden, or is it irrelevant? I don't think it's either. I don't think it hurts, and I don't think it's irrelevant. I think it actually does matter. I think that you can easily see after just a couple of games, one preseason game, one regular season game, there is a clear chemistry between James Harden and Christian Wood. These two guys can easily be all NBA caliber talents together. They really can. Christian Wood gives you so much more than what Clint Capella gave you in this duo. And we saw how impressive that duo was already with Clint Capella, who had nowhere near the skill set that Christian Wood has.
Look, that's their first official basketball game together in the regular season, and they just combined for 75, and they made it look easy. So is it going to convince Harden, or is it irrelevant? Again, I agree with Jackson, neither, right? In the short term, it has to be encouraging. Whether or not he's going to be actively encouraged by it, like he probably can't help but think, damn, we almost won that game, right? And then in the long term, when the rotation actually returns, you have to think, man, they're probably going to win some games. I think a lot of people before the season had penciled in the Portland game as one that they could definitely lose. Same with the Denver game. So it's not like they dropped an easy one to Oklahoma City, for example, in terms of like the difficulty of their schedule. So when the rest of the rotation returns, Denver's probably going to be a tough game because Denver's good. Denver's got a big body in Jokic. They're going to miss Cousins again. And they're probably tired from this one. So they're probably going to gas out at some point against Denver. But once the rotation returns, I think they're going to start winning games, right? I think this team's going to start winning games, and I think you're going to see the narrative shift, and I think you're going to see the talk kind of change a little bit about James Harden and the Rockets from, they need to trade him now. This is toxic. The Rockets organization made XYZ mistakes. You're going to see it shift towards, hey, the Rockets are winning basketball games. You might even see it shift. If this type of statistical production continues, you might even see it shift towards James Harden is the MVP front runner. And I think it's also important to point out that at one point Harden had somewhere like, 25 and 12 assists, 29 and 13 assists. He started scoring when he needed to. And this is something I talked about previously. When this team is at full strength, the type of Harden you're going to get, hopefully, is going to be more of the Harden that we got in 2017, 2018, mixed with the Harden in 2016, 2017. And what I mean by that is his box scores will be a little more balanced, 20-something points, 10, 11 assists, 5, 6 rebounds, instead of like the top-heavy 44 points, on, 29 shots or 44 points on 32 shots, just less shot attempts. How many shot attempts did he have tonight?
Tonight, Harden finished with 22 shot attempts, 12 of 22.
22 we went to overtime. So I think last season he averaged like 24 a game or something like that. The year before that, I think he definitely averaged about 24 a game. So 22 shots in overtime. In regulation, it would have been like 17 or 18. That's not normal for James Harden and the Rockets winning games, So
to be fair, he did take 16 free throws. So I mean, so that's a big chunk of his production in this game came from driving and attempting those shots, but not getting credited with the shot attempt in that regard. So but I hear your point, right? Is seeing the version of Harden, and hopefully, right? Hopefully he has a chance to actually on a nightly basis, kind of decide, based on how the feel of the game is going, which Harden he needs to be, right? Does he need to be the Harden that is facilitating for his teammates? Does he need to be the Harden that is going to shoulder the scoring load? And we saw both versions of him in this game tonight. And it kind of feels like, when he starts games, sometimes he's kind of just, there are times where he looks like he's over invested in getting his teammates involved. And, he realizes guys aren't hitting shots or whatever, and they fall behind. And then he decides, okay, I need to turn it on. And tonight, thankfully, he had the 10 assists by half. Insanely impressive, display of passing ability right there. And then, like you said, he turned on the scoring when he needed to, because at one point he was, I think 17 and 10 at the half or something like that. And then came out and just, guns blazing in the third quarter, which is what they needed from him.
Look, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Keep going.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I was going to say, ideally, stereotypically in basketball, you're going to be the best team you can be when the team is good enough to let your best player be relatively passive until he needs to take over. And for too long, that's why Chris Paul was such a great foil to James Harden. There were nights where James Harden didn't have to bring it and Chris Paul could bring it. And that same dynamic, the way that it happened in the 17-18 season, was never recaptured in the 18-19 season or with Westbrook in the 19-20 season. But your team's going to be at its best when your best player can kind of chill and be, passive and disperse the ball and then take over when he needs to. And I think this team, if things click and if people stay healthy and COVID free, I think this team is going to be good enough. They're going to get playmaking. And it's different from your teammates are knocking down shots versus your teammates are creating shots. There's a big difference. And this team we saw, Jayshawn Tate was creating that's like your 8th or 9th or 10th man in the rotation, and he's creating. The Rockets never had that. When they get DeMarcus Cousins, when they get backup point guard Eric Gordon, and when they get John Wall, I really do think you're going to see Harden reinvigorated, whether he realizes it or not, because he loves to hoop, and he's going to see people hooping. He's going to see his teammates hooping, right? And he's got Christian Wood now. He can just loft it over the middle. He loves to do that. If people want to knock on him for being lazy, he loves just throwing it over the middle and letting his big man grab it. And there were a couple plays early on, we saw Harden drive in. I think it was the first lob he threw to Christian Wood. By the way, that one-hander was wild.
Absolutely insane.
But you could see, and we saw that happen so many times last season, where Harden gets to the middle, two people jump in front of him, and he's got to kind of like flip up the floater. Now, he didn't even have to jump. He's in a crouch position, just flipping it up, and Christian Wood is throwing it down. You can't understate how easy that makes things. So, yeah, to answer the question, I think if this team stays healthy, I think they're going to win a lot of games. And whether Harden wants to be in Houston or not, I think he might realize this is a contender.
All right, we're going to keep taking these questions because they're rolling in. We appreciate you guys being active in the chat, and we'll get there in just one moment.
Oh yeah,
all the stuff that gets edited out later.
drop some questions. If you got some questions, drop it. If you type my name and if you follow me, I'll try to answer it. Although I can't. Just type my name. I'll answer.
How are you gonna hold them hostage like that? You have to follow me, or I won't answer your questions. That's really petty, Roosh.
I just said just type my name and I'll answer it. You don't have to follow me.
I'm messing with you. All right, here we go.
but I think my takes are quality. I hope.
Debatable. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Joined right now by Roosh Williams, host of the Noble and Roosh Show on ballislife.com. Be sure to subscribe and check out that podcast as well as this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google Play Store, Stitcher, all those different places. Let's keep rolling with these questions. I've got this one here. What do you see the Rockets' crunch time lineup being? This is something that we debated a little bit, after the Rockets roster was kind of set. just talking about what we saw as the closing lineup. And this is something that I know you feel pretty strongly about, and I'm kind of trending that way too. Hopefully, PJ Tucker might not see a lot of time as a closer this season, depending on how other guys look and how other guys develop, because unfortunately he's a little one-dimensional offensively, and he kind of limits what you can do on that side of the basketball. Yeah, he's a great corner three-point shooter, but hell, like we saw tonight, right? He made the wrong read, the wrong decision. And does that happen all the time? No. But can PJ do anything else if he catches that ball in the corner and a defender rotates out to him in time? What's he going to do? Nothing.
You also saw him miss that tip in, which, man, it really bugs me when guys do that. Just come down with it. When it's crunch time and we need a bucket, just come down with it and then kick it out and reset the play. He missed that tip in. There was one play where he did come down with the rebound, but he tried to go back up with it in traffic and didn't get the foul call. I think that was kind of mid to late overtime. He's just limited, honestly. He's limited. So, and, in the crunch, offensively, when you have someone who's limited and can really only hit a corner three, it's going to hurt you because it's predictable unless they leave him wide open and he hits it. But
so we absolutely know it's going to be Harden, Wood, Wall.
Harden, Wood, Wall, probably Gordon, I bet.
Yeah.
And
also,
then
shout out because Wall is in this suggested closing lineup twice. So in this scenario, we are cloning John Wall and having two of them on the court instead of just one.
I would say Harden, Wall, Gordon, Christian Wood, and then the fifth person is going to depend on who they're playing. If Marc Gasol's out there, DeMarcus Cousins. If Nurkic is out there, maybe DeMarcus Cousins, right? If you're playing a team that's
you're just going to keep throwing out bigs and keep saying DeMarcus Cousins.
I'm just giving
two DeMar Carroll.
two examples of teams that might have bigs, and then a couple examples of teams that might not, right? Golden State, they might throw out any of the wings, Nwaba, Tate. So yeah, I think it's nice that Tucker is not like de facto starting or de facto closing lineup. And I hope, like I said, we get to a point where he's not necessarily in the starting lineup either, because I think the Rockets will be at their best with PJ Tucker coming off the bench, playing about 25 to 30 minutes.
All right, we've got our next question here. Do you enjoy the improved ball movement that you have seen in the preseason games versus Portland?
Yes.
Just absolutely yes, right? It's
yes.
And I feel like it's important to note, right, that one misconception about Mike D'Antoni that I think we need to clear up, and maybe it's a good idea to do this with you right here, Roosh, right? Is look, it's not what we saw,
was that segment directed at me? Is that like, because you had that segment right after you brought me on?
It wasn't directed at you. It's just,
was it inspired by?
Sure. Let's go with that.
That's what I thought. That's what I figured.
Anyways, but
hey,
right?
Just tag me. That's all. Just
we're not tweeting in. All right. So here's the deal, right? Is, Rockets fans and myself included at times have a negative perception of Mike D'Antoni and what he did with the team. Now you can totally, call him out for the lack of adjustments, the lack of, creativity at times with lineups, the short rotations, all those things. Right. But, especially one thing to take note of, and many people have pointed this out, is that what, the quote unquote system that was run in Houston wasn't really Mike D'Antoni's system, right? You can go all the way back to what really was his system with the Phoenix Suns, and they had a lot more ball movement, a lot more guys who could do more on the court in Phoenix than they did with the Rockets.
What is the point you're trying to make? Are you trying to make the point that Mike D'Antoni didn't run his real system in Houston and he defaulted to James Harden doing James Harden?
Yes.
Okay. Now I love that. My rebuttal to that is, if the head coach can't fix and corral that, then what is the head coach? And that's it's a criticism I've had a lot. What's Mike D'Antoni's role if he's not going to do anything? I understand.
Based on everything that we've heard and learned about, this summer and leading into this game, leading into the season, I think that it was a top-down issue with the organization of too much empowerment of James Harden to a point where they started playing away a brand of basketball that made him, the center of the universe, that made him the sun and everybody else orbited him. And Mike, for better or for worse, and apparently for worse, didn't feel the need or didn't have the power or the desire, take your choice, to change that. 4 years in, lame duck coach, all that stuff, maybe had he gotten the contract re-up and, signed on for a few extra years, maybe he would have felt the need to, shift things up a little bit, but we didn't see that happen. And now we're having an organizational, change with, Rockets brass changing, bringing in a brand new coaching staff, Steven Silas, all this stuff. And hopefully we're going to see a version of James Harden that buys into this new system, because he has no choice not to, right? He either sits out or he buys in.
I mean, look, I agree with you. And there were top-down issues within the organization. Love Daryl Morey, a beloved Rocket GM. I think the best Rockets GM of my lifetime, Raphael Stone pending. But that was one of his issues, right? KP says this often, and I agree. I mean, managing people in that respect was one of his issues, right? He placates to the max, and that plus the way Mike D'Antoni's kind of soft approach took form. I mean, yeah, those combined to create the perfect storm for Harden to just do whatever he wanted, and that's why we're in the position we're in now. However, again, if you're the head coach and you can't corral that, then what is your purpose, right? You can make the point about being a lame duck and like, had he signed an extension, things would have looked different. Yeah, right. I mean, he was here for 4 years. Nothing looked different. It was the same thing. After the first year, it was the same thing year after year, except trending more and more polarized by year, So, look, I have nothing but praise and love for Mike D'Antoni for what he did for the Rockets. He probably would have had a ring if Chris Paul didn't get hurt. That is definitely and will never be lost upon me. But he didn't have the ability to get James Harden to see a different vision. And I mean, we got one game with Steven Silas. Whether or not Harden stays, I can't imagine he didn't have fun tonight playing that way. And Steven Silas got him to play that way, right? And I think a lot of that, has to do with Mike D'Antoni's, he's older, right? He's almost 70 years old. Like Steven Silas is young. This is his first chance. He's hungry. All that kind of stuff matters. So, yeah, I did enjoy the ball movement. I think every Rockets fan did. It's nice to see baskets happening. It's nice to see points being generated and scored, and you're surprised, like, oh, that was cool. Not just, please go in. Okay, the 3 dropped. Thanks. Or please get the foul call. Damn, they didn't call it. James is on the ground. They got a 4-on-5. Like, yeah, mathematically and all that, it ends up playing out pretty well for the Rockets. It didn't in the postseason, but basketball. Steve Nash gave an answer recently that sounds like a lot of baloney, but if you break it down, I like it. He said his aim is for the Nets to be their offense to be part art and part science. And at the end of the day, that like basketball is numbers and stats, and then there's like a beauty to the game, like the 2014 Spurs moving the ball, like just painting a picture on the court, right? And that's the type of basketball I like. I like the mix, right? We saw the mix, so I like it. I love it. I can't wait to see John Wall in the mix. I can't wait to see Boogie Cousins passing the ball. You saw some plays where Nurkic, like for example, on the inbound play, I think Sterling Brown in like the third quarter checks in, sticks Damian Lillard. Lillard inbounds it from the baseline under their own basket, and then he cuts to the basket, and Nurkic flips it over the top for him, bucket. DeMarcus Cousins can do that. Clint Capella couldn't do that. Robert Covington couldn't do that. PJ Tucker can't do that. The Rockets centers can't do that. DeMarcus Cousins can do that. So like there's a multi-layered attack with different angles, plus the same old that we've seen. It's nice, it's refreshing. That's why the Rockets put up 126 with their freaking second and partial third string.
There's a way to incorporate both methods. And you're right. First off, the Steve Nash quote does sound a little bit like baloney on the surface, but I think he was hitting at a bigger picture there. And I think that's something that you and I specifically have discussed before. Just talking about the Morey ball approach took away some of the beauty from the game, but not only, because just saying, oh, they're not playing beautiful basketball, right? That sounds a little pretentious on the surface, but it took away some of the feel of the game, some of the natural feel of the game. You hit the nail on the head by talking about.
It's not even pretentious.
Well, fair. But
a lot of people really feel that way. They're like, I hate the way the Rockets play. That's why.
And I've never hated the way they played, because one, just watching James Harden is a marvel night in, night out. But you're right? There's movement specifically on the play that could have won them the game, where Jayshawn Tate had the 3 that rimmed in and out, right? That play happened because there was so much passing and repositioning happening from so many different guys on that one possession. And that, the shot ultimately was created by Christian Wood, who was driving the ball in and kicking it out. So, in what world does that happen previously, where, you have the ball in Harden's hands and it's going to, devolve into an isolation play, and he either makes the shot or he doesn't, right? And maybe you get an offensive rebound, maybe you get a reset, but that's it. There'd be very little movement, one or no passes at all whatsoever. And a couple of the plays too that really stood out to me in this one, there were a couple out of timeout plays, or ATOs that Silas ran, where one of them, he had Christian Wood pass the ball in or whatever. And James Harden actually posted up, and then Christian Wood came and set like a screen with Harden out of the post or something. And he was able to like reposition for a three and drain it because he just needed that little bit of separation. But it was just a really clean look. And it was something that, for a second I thought, oh, we're going to get post Harden, right? He's going to operate out of the post and do something. And then instead he like worked it back out to the 3-point line. But because the defense had to pay a little bit of attention to Christian Wood, he got the wide open look. And it's things like that we haven't really seen a lot of before. And we just saw a lot of different looks, a lot of different ways that this team can approach the game. And again, they did it without three of their best players in Eric Gordon, John Wall, and DeMarcus Cousins. So if you're watching this game, if you're listening to us right now, there is a lot to be grateful for. There's a lot to be optimistic about. This isn't misplaced optimism. It's not like the Rockets went out there and got thumped by the Blazers, because at the end of the day, the onus was on the Blazers to win this game, right? They had their full roster. They already lost their opener, right?
And it took CJ McCollum. It took CJ McCollum going nuclear to make it happen.
And for Dame to have Dame had a pretty solid night in the office too. I mean, all things considered, his efficiency was just in the toilet. 11 of 28 shooting, really abysmal night for Dame. But he also had 5 turnovers. God, painful.
You just went from saying Dame was awesome to he had an abysmal night.
Well, look, I mean, in a way, right? He put up the numbers. He just didn't do it on good efficiency.
Right. I wanted to combine real quick 2 comments. So someone asked, do you think that we get blown out in this game with Mike D'Antoni as the coach?
Found it.
And there you go. You're quick. Yes, I think so. I think they might keep it close, right? Generating the threes, which they didn't really have the shooters, so maybe they wouldn't have generated the threes, but I think they would have kept it close. And then once Portland made that run at the end, they would have just beat the brakes off them. You would have seen threes going up, Harden taking step backs, probably starting to clank them, and then Portland pulls away and wins by like 12, 13. That's what I think, or maybe even more. That's what I think would have happened. And I want to tie that into someone else who asked, do you think that this team could possibly have you're quick, could possibly have the fight and grit that the 2017 and 18 team had? And look, it's just been one game in the season, but I'm going to say a good old Stone Cold Steve Austin, hell yeah. Because did he do that? I love Stone Cold. But
I can't remember. No, it wasn't Stone Cold. Wait, are you thinking, oh yeah, brother? Because that was not Stone Cold Steve Austin.
No, I could have sworn. I know he did the what? I thought he did a hell yeah. Anyways, the point is, I think so, man, because look, they got dogs. Steven Jackson said this. They got some dogs, man. John Wall doesn't play. DeMarcus Cousins, when he's locked in, does not play. Christian Wood apparently is not a fan of games. Eric Gordon seems to be locked in and, rejuvenated in hopefully a new role that's going to give us some different production out of him. Like, man, they got some guys that are ready to get in the trenches. It's just a matter of if their lead horse is ready and willing to get in the trenches with them in James Harden. So I think they could, man. Like what the Rockets had in that 17-18 season was embodied by Trevor Ariza and Chris Paul and PJ Tucker eventually in terms of attitude and grit. And it was kind of just like stamped on with sealed over, perfect cherry on top with Luka Mbamute in terms of just kind of the attitude. And I think this team has that with the guys I just mentioned: Wall, Boogie, Eric Gordon, PJ, Jayshawn Tate, Nwaba, Sterling Brown. Like, they got some dogs, man. So I think
whose guy you completely left off that you haven't mentioned? Steven Silas. I think he's got a bit of a dog in him. Like legitimately, like you see how he's interacting and dealing with, this gigantic mess, right? He finally becomes a head coach. Finally thinks he's going to get a chance to coach an NBA team. He's got 2 ex-MVP caliber players in James Harden, Russell Westbrook. Then suddenly, everything starts falling apart. Your stars want out. GM quit. It's just a mess. And so the way that he has handled himself and the way that he's been reacting to certain things, right? You talk about, the quote that he had, discussing the heated exchange between Harden and Jayshawn Tate in practice, which, hey, let's point out the fact that if Jayshawn Tate was putting in this kind of work in practice against James Harden, there's no wonder why James chucked a ball at his head, because Jayshawn Tate went out there in his first NBA game and dropped 13 points on 5 of 9 shooting and was absolutely outworking everybody else on the court. He was the guy. Every moment that he was on the court, he was the guy diving for loose balls, making hustle plays, making winning basketball plays. I think that is an overstated trope at times, winning basketball plays, but legitimately, Jayshawn Tate's a guy that does that. And he had some moments, right, in this game where you could see the rookie in him. You could see some of the indecision, some of the mistakes here and there. But for the most part, I'll take a guy 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10 like a guy like Jayshawn Tate, who's going to hustle and leave it all on the court for better or for worse, than, a guy who's going to half-ass some plays here and there. He is going to grow. He's going to make those mistakes. And the good news is Steven Silas is going to allow him to make those mistakes, right? We had guys who could potentially have grown into decent rotation players. Isaiah Hartenstein is playing for the Nuggets right now, playing meaningful minutes for them. And that couldn't happen under Mike D'Antoni because he refused to give those guys a chance to, really show what they could do in a real game atmosphere, which is frustrating because nothing, you can practice all the live long day. You can do shoot arounds. You can, maybe you don't see something in practice, but at the end of the day, the only real game reps are real games. So, it's great to finally see that youth, paying off. And I think Steven Silas has been a big part of that mentality culture change.
Well, first of all, someone commented saying Stone Cold definitely used to say hell yeah. I knew I was not crazy. Huge Stone Cold fan. I used to there you go.
Number one Stone Cold fan right here.
Hey dude, I had an Austin 316 shirt like back in the Gap. It's just been 20 years since I've like really watched it, so I forget. But it's hard to say Steven Silas has dog in him given his devilishly beautiful smile. However, I think it's just hunger. He's hungry. He's hungry to prove himself. Jayshawn Tate, hungry to prove himself. I bet you Sterling Brown and especially David Nwaba, they're hungry. I mean, look, I have been fortunate enough to talk to some NBA players, both current and past, and people who've been around them. And the more you kind of talk to some of these people, you understand that some of the stuff that separates like the winning teams from the mediocre teams, from the losing teams, it's stuff like that. It's hunger. What's up with the suits? We just wanted to, suit up. First game of the season. We wanted to look good for you, for the people, for ourselves. That's the reason. But look.
Yeah, the suits look good, right, guys? Come on. I even got a little James Harden pin right here. Like it's, I went all out.
Look, if you were watching a post game on some network, they'd be wearing suits. So I'm going to suit up in front of my Christmas tree for your enjoyment.
In the great words of what's his name? I don't watch the show enough. How I Met Your Mother. Somebody help me here.
I don't watch How I Met Your Mother.
What's his name? Barney Stinson. There we go. Suit up, right? There we go. I don't watch enough of that show, but
dress to impress. Nicolas Fuentes, he knows. But listen, so the point is the past iterations of the Rockets, what I was going to say is some of this stuff comes down to motivation. Like I forgot who I was talking to Troy Daniels, and Troy Daniels was telling us that he was talking about the Nuggets 3-1 comeback against the Clippers, right? After doing it to the Jazz.
I'm putting this
and
on.
He was saying and he was saying, Troy Daniels was telling us that Jamal Murray, when they went down 3-1 to the Clippers, was like, nah, man, I don't want to go home. Let's finish these guys. And he was saying that's rare because a lot of these NBA players, they'll get down, they've got their checks, they've got their good lives. They're just like, man, whatever, bro. Like we're down. We shouldn't be here. Like, let's just leave. Like, let's play. And then whatever, and then we'll bounce. And you'd be surprised, because you think, man, if I was in that position, I'd give it my all every night. But they're humans too, right? So not everyone has that competitive drive and desire and hunger. So when you get a guy like Jayshawn Tate, who's, just got his first chance. By the way, Golden State gave him a 10-day before COVID hit. So we kind of got lucky that fell apart.
Thank God.
Yeah. So, but you get a guy like that who's hungry. And he's going to be out there proving himself. He makes those hustle plays, right? PJ Tucker's got tired legs. There's Jayshawn Tate. On those veteran teams, some of those guys just might be out of gas after a certain point, or you might get some element of been there, done that, whatever. So it's important to have guys that are hungry. And I saw someone say that John Wall was going to be the leader of this team. And I wanted to comment on that and say, yeah, Wall definitely does have that hunger to commenter named Jungle. I don't think Harden is a leader. Wall will lead them together and play second fiddle. I was going to say, I think this team has a few leaders. I'm telling you, Boogie and Wall are vocal guys. They're respected in terms of their toughness and their ability. And you put them by themselves, okay, them next to James Harden, plus all these weapons, all of a sudden they become enforcer, bruiser types with that type of mentality that James Harden needs. Now he's got a couple guys protecting him instead of just Chris Paul, right? And I think that's going to go a long way because you got different types of leadership. You got Wall and Harden. You got Christian Wood and James Harden that lead on the court with their play and kind of with their silent demeanor. And then you got John Wall and Boogie that are vocal leaders. They're up in your face. So it's the right blend. It just seems like the only weakness on this team, there's a few, but they're weaknesses that can be mitigated. And if this team gels and stays healthy, they're going to win some games, man. I think they're going to beat the crap out of bad teams like that 17-18 team did, and I think they're going to stick with the good teams.
You're allowed to say shit on this podcast. It's okay.
They're going to beat the shit out of some bad teams. And
we don't curse a lot at Locked On Rockets, but it's okay.
And look, I also want to say this. This is a thought I had. This is kind of a half-baked take, but maybe there's some credence to it. Look, the Rockets dropped games over the last year and a half. They've dropped games to teams that they should beat, right? It's frustrating. They'll go on like an Eastern Conference road trip and lose to Detroit, on a Blake Griffin buzzer beater. And they'll go and then they'll lose to Indiana. I guess Indiana's okay, but you get what I'm saying. Lose to Orlando, whatever. Now they've got two main players, Christian Wood and John Wall, that have played against all those teams. And they're used to playing those teams. It almost felt like the Rockets would get to the shitty Eastern Conference teams and kind of lose their way. Almost playing
once. Don't just start sprinkling it in every other word now.
And almost like they played down to their competition. But now you got guys that are used to playing those teams, John Wall, Christian Wood. So I wonder how that factors in. Again, one of their weaknesses the Rockets have always had, it seems like, except for the 17-18 season, is playing down to their competition. But I really think this team is good enough to where they might just thump their competition on the nights where they're supposed to against bad teams.
And from just a roster construction perspective, right? One of those issues, right, is you have Mike D'Antoni, who, for 4 years would consistently run those short rotations to where you've got guys who, on a nightly basis, for a team that prides itself on shooting as many threes as it does, you got dead legs, you got tired guys, guys not making defensive rotations, that kind of thing. But when you've got those dogs that we were talking about coming off the bench in Jayshawn Tate, David Nwaba, Sterling Brown, John Wall in the starting lineup, those guys who have that drive to win. But specifically about the bench guys, right? You have that energy infusion that you need to sometimes, hey, you see some dead legs out there, right? Just put in, one or two of those guys and kind of liven up the squad, right? Because then you've got those guys making hustle plays. And I don't know about you, but anytime that I've ever been out hooping, if I see somebody else really hustling, really buying in and trying, right? It's a mentality thing for the team, right? Because you don't want to be the one bum out there who's not, busting your ass for the win. And so you see, one or two other guys playing that way, diving for loose balls, doing that kind of thing. And then it makes you want to, behave the same way. And so you suddenly get that group mentality where everybody's really, digging in deep, trying to win some of these games. And hopefully we're not going to see those stretches where the Rockets give up those double-digit leads, right? They'll be able to double down and extend those leads. I think it was huge in this one, the first stretch where we saw Harden sit down after the first quarter. They extended the lead. And, with a bench unit that had no business being on the court because it's, the third stringers, essentially, they extended the lead.
And they did it without anyone having any type of elite, individual offensive skill or one-on-one ability. They just did it with energy, to your point. They did it by hustling. They did it by cutting. They did it by, turning loose balls into transition points. They hit some shots here and there, of course, but they just did it by, hustling, playing energetic basketball. And when you have that as a gear to shift into, and then you can shift back into death by Harden from three or playing 5 out, and then you can shift it over to post up Boogie Cousins and create and cut. We saw some baseline cuts when the ball went into the middle of the floor. We saw some guys cutting baseline and getting buckets from it. And then you turn that into John Wall exploding. There's just options.
And then you turn it into Eric Gordon dribbling the ball off his heel. Wait, sorry. I messed it up.
Hey, we're about to get backup point guard Gordon, baby. He's going to be driving. No, but look, so the point is we hear this term optionality, and it gets to the point where it just sounds like a little nerdy term, but there's a lot of truth to optionality. And what that gives you is a versatile attack, which we've talked about a million times. One question I want to get to, Corley Sampson asks, because this is important, any concern about Wood's post defense? Yes, I highlighted this in a video I made about Christian Wood. I think it was the day of.
You made a video.
I made a tape, baby. I think it was a video that I dropped on what should have been the Rocket.
I'm proud of your boomer ass. I'm gonna just say.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. I think I dropped it on what would have been the Rockets' first game against OKC before it got canceled. So if you follow me on Twitter, go back and look at that and check that out. I kind of run through Christian Wood's game. One of the weaknesses I pointed out was in pick and roll coverage, he's soft sometimes. He doesn't step. And there were some times we saw Damian Lillard blow down the middle and Wood was just late stepping over. I think it happened. I think it was the bucket that I forgot what the score was, but Damian Lillard went down the middle and he used his right hand and curved it in from the left side of the rim. And Craig Ackerman was like, oh, nice move. I think it was late in overtime, last minute or two. Christian Wood should have stepped up. He didn't step up. He stepped over late, and he was effective in changing the shot, but Damian Lillard's too good, so he was able to still get it in. So, yeah, I do have some concerns, not necessarily about post-up. He's not, again, DeMarcus Cousins is going to be your guy to guard like Nurkic and those types of people on the post. If Wood is our primary post defender, yeah, he's not very good at it. So I do have concerns about that. But his length made a difference, and I just need him to get better at stepping in pick and roll coverage, at the right time. Because like when I watched some tape on him from his Portland games, his Detroit Pistons games, and there's a lot of times where like he'll just give up a really open, uncontested mid-range shot from pretty close, not like a deep mid-range shot because he steps late. So that's a concern. But
part of that can be attributed to, the fact that, look, this is the first time that he's going to be getting starter level minutes, right? Apart from his little 12-game stretch with the Pistons, he's going to be in the spotlight quite a bit more than he has in the past. So, we've heard a lot from other Rockets players, specifically DeMarcus Cousins, being really high on Christian Wood's potential, thinking that he can be an all NBA defense type player. So he just needs, to be in the right situation with the right molding, the right, guys teaching him around him. And I think that we're going to see that improve as the season progresses. One area that I want to point out about Christian Wood, because it's not all sunshine and roses. There's some mistakes here and there. I want to see him become a better screen setter offensively. Like legitimately, he sets some pretty weak screens, especially for Harden when, as Harden's calling for the screen. And there were some good ones in there, but he needs to do a better job of like picking, setting strong, really getting that defender, off of Harden so that person's chasing them and on Harden's hip rather than, there were so many times defenders were able to fight over the screen with ease, when Christian Wood was setting them. So I think that's something that he's going to get better at over time, realizing that, hey, if I set a solid screen, I'm going to roll hard as hell to the basket and get a wide open alley-oop if I set a really good screen, because then Harden's driving to the rim and it's basically game over.
Hey, and all of this is true, and he still dropped 31 points on 22 shots. So, it's good news.
We're over here nitpicking, and the man dropped 30 points in his first official NBA game as a Houston Rocket. We're over here nitpicking, but there's a lot to be happy about with this team.
It's good news for the Rockets, man. I mean, like I said, it looks like if everyone stays healthy and COVID-free, big if still, because they got some guys that have been hurt. But they should be able to stick with the good teams, man. I mean, they just match up individually, and individual matchups don't always dictate the outcome of games, as we all know. But individually, man, look, with the Lakers, you got Cousins and Gasol. You got John Wall, Dennis Schroeder in terms of quick twitch guards and stuff like that. You got, obviously, LeBron and Harden on the wings. You got Christian Wood and Anthony Davis. I mean, the Lakers have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, which is better than James Harden and Christian Wood. Don't get it twisted. But, then the Rockets have a ton of energy players against the Clippers. DeMarcus Cousins and Zubac. Christian Wood with Ibaka. James Harden, John Wall, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. There's a lot of individual matchups that work, So it's exciting. I mean, I just can't see after the 10th game of the season, after I think it's the Lakers back-to-back, things get kind of easy on the schedule, man. And if this team is healthy and they're locked in, I'm telling you, they might go on a run.
And you want to talk about some games that are going to be important, that are going to carry some weight. If you want to convince James Harden to stay, you better show out in those Laker games. You better show him that there is a way for this team, as presently constructed, to beat the defending champion Lakers. If you can go out and win one of those games, if you go out and win both of those games, you got to imagine that James Harden's going to be looking around saying, all right, we might have a decent team here. And it is regular season. It's not the playoffs. There's differences. You're not going to get playoff LeBron, right? But at the same time, those games are going to mean something.
And don't forget, look, if the Rockets start winning games, man, credit to Rafael Stone. They still got some assets to play with if they want to go all in. If they can if the Harden meter starts to teeter, all right.
The worst bar of your entire career.
If the Harden meter starts to teeter, and maybe he starts shifting to wanting to remain in Houston, or to at least being open to convincing, they still got some assets to go out there and get another big piece, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too excited over a loss, which sounds like a typical fan. But ever since we saw a couple things click in the preseason, specifically that beat down against the Spurs in the last game, it just kind of got hard to not get excited about the potential, man. There's a lot of potential. Like, they can beat teams without Harden on a couple nights, you know, right? Like, they could beat, like, I don't know, what are the bottom feeders? The Knicks.
Oh,
the Bulls.
the Thunder. There we go.
The Thunder might surprise teams. They're going to be gritty. But, yeah, I think they won tonight. Charlotte, right? Like, they can beat some of those teams without James Harden theoretically. We got to see it. But, like, I feel like we have that type of team. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm not wrong.
And I hope you're not wrong too. And I think that's a good place to stop. We have gone much longer than intended because these are supposed to be 30-minute shows. Hopefully nobody yells at me from the network. Hey,
if they yell at you for more content, then I don't know what to say.
All right, but that's going to do it for us. Roosh, let everybody know where to track you down at.
ROOSH Williams, Roosh Williams on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram. I don't really post much. And go to anywhere that you get your podcasts from, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. Search Noble and Roosh Show. Type in the ampersand, the and sign, Noble and Roosh Show. We interview NBA journalists for different teams. We interview former and current NBA players. We got an interview with Andrew Bogut and Taylor Rooks coming up soon. So subscribe, rate, review. Always love, baby.
And definitely be sure to continue listening to Locked On Rockets. If you are listening, if you're interacting, really appreciate you checking out our live shows. Definitely be checking out the podcast. We have a recap up after every single game, always 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at JT Gatlin, the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. And be sure to check out the blog at Clutch City CR. Check out the Launchpad podcast as well. We've got a rotating panel of hosts over there doing a great job, dropping on Tuesdays and Fridays this season. So a couple podcasts a week over there. But for this episode of Locked On Rockets, that's going to do it. So as always, thank you all for tuning in and listening. And be sure to tune back in here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.
And lastly, if anyone is good with Photoshop, let's get a graphic, because if that Harden meter starts to teeter, look out. H-Town.
I hate it so much. I'm leaving all this in. All right, that's going to do it.